student of Knowledge TV.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We concluded last week's lesson number 6, by looking at the masla and the ruling with regards to dibaagha, or in English as it's known as tanning. And I mentioned that there are two ways where the hides or the skin of an animal becomes pure and pak. The first way is the easiest way, and that is that when you ritually sacrifice an animal Islamically, then automatically not only does the flesh of the animal become pak and halal to consume, but at the same time the flesh and the skin of the animal, the hide of the animal also becomes pak and pure. So just say, for example, you get hold of a cow or a sheep or a goat and you sacrifice the animal. And you sacrifice according to the rules of the Sharia. And that is that you have to make sure that you cut open its throat. The zabih, the slaughterer, has to recite Bismillah. And the third condition is that the zabih has to be either a Muslim or, if certain conditions are found, a person from the people of the book, i.e. a Jew or a Christian. And if these three conditions are found, then automatically not only does the meat of the animal become lawful and halal, but the skin also becomes lawful and also becomes pak and pure to use. So therefore, if you want, you can then mold this particular skin or flesh into a prayer mat, and you can read namaz on that. You can mold it, as they would do in the olden days, into some kind of container or utensil, and then you can use that to store water in. That will be no problem at all, and to use that will be considered lawful and permissible. And this type of dibaagha or tanning even applies for unlawful and haram animals as well. So just say, for example, it's going to be very impossible or rare, but just say, for example, you get hold of a tiger and you somehow kneel the tiger to the floor, and then you ritually slaughter and sacrifice that tiger. So that tiger, even though in this scenario here, the meat would not be lawful and permissible to consume, but the skin of that tiger would be pak and pure to use. So that is the first category of dibaagha, which is done by Islamically slaughtering a specific animal or a certain animal, and the skin of the animal becomes pure and pak. And the second way the process of dibaagha is carried out, and that is like the modern technique, and that is that what will happen is that if an animal which has died either naturally or which has been killed or slaughtered in a way which is not according to the laws or the regulations of the Sharia. So just say, for example, there was a cow, somebody drove over that particular cow. Or it was a sheep or a goat, and somebody battered that sheep or goat with a baseball bat or something like that. So that goat or that particular cow, which has now died, it got killed not according to the rules of the Sharia. So technically speaking, that animal here is a maita, is a carcass and is a carrion. So just because it's a carcass and carrion, obviously fair enough, you can't consume the meat, you can't eat the meat. But the skin of the animal, you can still make it lawful and pak and pure. And the way you do it is that you will somehow try to peel the skin from the animal, then you will put some kind of chemicals or some kind of things inside the skin, and then that will absorb and take away the impurity and the najas, and the skin which is then left over after this particular process, or what they would do in olden days, they will actually put the skin out in the front and then let the sun dry away and absorb the impurities, then that particular skin will also be pure and part to use. And this is the process which obviously people use nowadays, and because this particular process is used nowadays, so therefore wearing fur coats will be lawful and permissible. Wearing, shall I say, boots made out of snake skins will also be permissible. Wearing belts made out of snake skin will also be permissible and lawful as well. Even though those animals are unlawful and haram to consume. But what happens is that when they kill those animals, those snakes or those animals or those tigers and so on, what they then do with the skin is that they then treat it chemically so that the impurities and najas is automatically absorbed. Then afterwards to use that for clothing purposes, to use that as a prayer mat, to use that for making into some kind of utensil or some kind of container, then that is something which is lawful and that is something which is permissible. Now the last part of this particular section, which Imam Quduri rahmatullahi mentions here, and this is where today's lesson will start off from. He says, وَالشَّعْرُ well, the sentence before that, he says, إِلَّا جِلْدَ الْخِنْزِيرِ وَالْأَرْضِ, which means that the process of dibaagha or tanning is allowed and is applicable for every single animal, for every single skin. Meaning that even though the animal is unlawful and haram to consume, such as bears, such as tigers, such as donkeys, and so on and so forth, but if you somehow chemically skin of the animal, then that particular skin will be part and pure to use. However, there are two exceptions. Exception is number one, khinzir, swines. That the skin or the flesh of a swine can never ever be part, can never ever be pure. Even if you somehow were to peel the skin of a swine and a pig and you were to wash it with liquid or detergent and so on, even then it is still najas, even then it is still filth, and even then to come into your body, if you were to touch it, then your hands will be impure and napak, you will also be impure and napak. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created swines and pigs in such a way that every single aspect of that is najas and filth. So the practice or the method of tanning is not applicable for pigs. So therefore, if you somehow were to get the of a skin and if you were to tan it, whether it's chemically or whether you left it outside to absorb, or whether you even did the Islamic ritual slaughter over a pig, even then the meat, the flesh, everything of a pig will still remain impure and will still remain najas, will still remain impermissible and unlawful to use. Now just a couple of maslas with regards to the issue of pigs and swine. And there's one masla which I want to highlight here, and that is with regards to the issue of gelatine. Now gelatine, which we find in chocolate or in sweets or in cakes. The question arises is that whether that gelatine is lawful and permissible to consume. And sometimes what kind of blurs the picture is that someone, he may give you something like a chocolate or a cake, and you can get gelatin from beef, you can get gelatin from sheep and other animals, so therefore it should be lawful. Now the answer to this question, or the answer to that particular scenario, will be that it is true you can get gelatin from other animals. It's not just something which is unique and specific with pigs and swines, but you can get it from other animals, you can other animals. But one thing which needs to be clear, and that is that many of the food, cakes, chocolate, sweets, which do have gelatin inside, many of them are actually extracted from pigs. So that is like one fact, and that is that many of them are extracted from pigs. So therefore, because of that reason, to consume that particular chocolate or sweet or cake will be impermissible and unlawful to consume. Now, there are occasions where gelatin can be extracted from other animals and then put inside that particular item or that particular food. But even then, especially in this country, where the meat are slaughtered by non-Muslims, then they don't slaughter it according to the rules of the Sharia. We will look at this topic later on in the section when we look at halal meat and so on. So many of the non-Muslims who slaughter, even though they may claim themselves to be a Jew or a Christian, but many of them are not actually Jews or Christians. They're just like by name they're Jews, by name they're Christians, but many of them in fact are atheists. So because of that reason, and because we're not sure, we can't have any kind of that not aware of that gelatin and other kind of gelatin which have come from an animal other than pigs, even then it will be unlawful and possible to consume. Unless you know that particular person or this particular sweet is got gelatin, the cow has and according to the rules of the Sharia, then fair enough you can consume it. But unless you're not sure or you don't know, then the masla will be that it will be impermissible and unlawful to consume any products which have gelatin inside. Now another ruling which kind of stems or kind of comes from this ruling of gelatin, and that is with regards to gelatin in capsules for medicine and so on, in particular those who have diabetes and they take like insulin, and sometimes these gelatin extracts or particles are found inside, so whether it is lawful or permissible to consume. Now this is one of the beauties of the creation, and this is one of the beauties of this dunya and this world which we are living in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran has said that everything in this world He has created for our amusement and for our benefit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that many places in the Holy Quran He has described that everything in this dunya and this world has been created for our benefit. So even everything like the land, the atmosphere, what we breathe in, everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for our benefit so that we can recognize and realize the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from this particular verse, some people, they raise questions and objections and they say that, well, how can that be true that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did everything in this world for our benefit? And they say that, well, there are some poisonous animals and so on. How can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created that poisonous animal for our benefit? So the answer given by the commentators of the Holy Quran, by the Mufassirin, is that even the poison of certain animals, doctors and scientists, they use it to make medicine. Even some kind of poisonous trees, some poisonous mushrooms, doctors actually take those mushrooms and trees and they actually make medicine from it. Those poisonous kind of plants and blackberries, they actually take it and they make medicine. And similarly, again, some may argue and say that, okay, if Allah has created everything in this world for our benefit, then something like the khinzir and the swine, there's no benefit in there, so that then deceives our argument. So the answer to that is that no, even things such as gelatin, which is taken from pigs and swine, make medicine such as insulin and capsules, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made that for benefit as well. Now, going back to the ruling or the masla that whether it is permissible to have such capsules or such kind of insulin, the answer is whether another lawful or halal medicine can be found or not. If another lawful, readily available, effective halal medicine can be found, then you will have to go for the halal medicine, for the lawful medicine, use that, and you will have to abstain from capsules which have gelatin inside or any kind of insulin which may have gelatin extracts in. However, if that is not the case, and for your shifa, for your cure, this is the only medicine available, then in that situation it will be permissible for you to use. And that is the same of unlawful and haram medicines or cough medicine which may have alcohol inside. And that is that the question you need to ask yourself, that whether another lawful, readily available, effective medicine is found. And if that is the case, then you won't be able to use that particular medicine. However, if that is not the case and the only medicine which you have available to cure you, to make you better, is this one here, then you will have to use that. So that is one exception where the process of tanning does not take place. And the second exception is with regards to humans, the skins of humans and so on. Then, as I mentioned last week's lesson as well, very briefly, because of their nobility, because of their sanctity, because of their karama, you cannot, for example, when a human being passes away, you cannot peel his skin off and then chemically treat it and then afterwards start making it into prayer mats. The reason why for its impermissibility is due to its karamat, due to its respect, and due to its sanctity. Now this takes me on to another masla, another ruling, and that is with regards to something which is called organ transplants or blood transfusion, which entails using human parts and human bodily parts, that whether that is permissible or not. Now very briefly, the masla or the ruling with regards to organ transplant is that there are two views or two opinions with regards to this issue. The first opinion is that it is impermissible to carry out organ transplants. And the reason for its impermissibility is that all the organs which we have in our body, it is a trust and amanat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these eyes, these nose, these lungs, livers, kidneys, all these kind of things for 50, 60, 70 years. Some for even less, some for even longer. And then as soon as we pass away, then automatically these lungs, these livers and kidneys goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's possession. It's similar to the ruling of inheritance, that whatever you have, it belongs to you. But as soon as you pass away, then all the wealth which you had, all the houses, the businesses, the property, money which you have, it all now belongs to your heirs, to your inheritors, to your children, to your sons, daughters, and so on and so forth. So exactly same with regards to our organs as well. So therefore, as soon as we pass away, these things belongs to Allah, so we are not allowed to then give it out to other people, to then donate it to other people. So that's one reason. And the second reason for the impermissibility of organ transplants is because it's mentioned in a hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that when you break the bone of a dead person, the same pain and the same kind of feeling or grief or hurt a living person would feel, exactly the same pain the dead person will feel as well. So even though that person you think is dead and he can't feel anything, but if you cut up his body and then were to take out his kidneys and then you were to donate it to someone, the same way if someone had cut up your body and stomach and took away your kidney, the pain and the hurt which you will feel, that same pain would be felt by the dead person. But the only difference is that we will show our pain, we will start crying and screaming and so on, but the dead person would not. But he is still feeling the pain. So because of that reason, the first group of scholars or ulamas have said that organ transplants are impermissible. However, latter-day contemporary scholars have given a more flexible ruling, and they've said that if there is a necessity or a dhurura, and it's not going to be like, and they've even said as well that it's not like a general ruling, it's not like a general permission for everyone to start transplanting organs and giving away blood and so on, but it's only in certain situations or in extreme situations, then they've allowed organ transplants, they've allowed blood transfusions. And certain situations can be such as, like, for example, you've got a son and he needs a liver, or he needs a kidney, and then the kidney which you have matches the kidney which he needs, then in that situation it will be permissible to donate your organ, to donate that kidney to that little child. So in those kind of situations, then it will be permissible. And the same rule also applies again, for example, whether you can get organs from non-Muslims as well. The same rule applies, and that is that it is permissible as well. Sometimes what may happen is that there may be a child or someone who needs some blood, and you can't give blood for some reason, but they have a blood bank where non-Muslims have donated blood into that bank. So again, if it's for your child, then you can use non-Muslim blood as well. Obviously, it's preferable to use Muslim blood, but if that cannot be found at that particular situation, and you were to use non-Muslim blood into the child, then that would also be lawful and permissible. So that is a ruling with regards to organ transplants and blood transfusion. The next part of the ruling, Imam Quduri rahmatullah goes on to say, وَالشَّعْرُ الْمَيْتَةِ وَعَظْمُهَا طَاهِرٌ, that the hair of a deceased or the hair of a carcass, وَعَظْمُهَا, and also the bones of a carcass, طَاهِرٌ, is spark and pure. Now, one final ruling before the author finishes and wraps up this particular section is with regards to maita and carcass. Now, it's mentioned in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةِ, that indeed He has prohibited, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited for you al-maita, i.e. carcass and carrion. And in the English, or the English definition of the word maita, or the translation of the word maita in English will be carcass or carrion, which basically means an animal which has died, like a dead animal, then that is called a carcass or a carrion. And then from the definition or the English definition, it seems as though that any kind of animal which has died naturally or has died in some other way, you're not allowed to consume or do anything with it. But the word al-maita, when used in the Islamic context, it has a broad meaning. And the word maita basically means any animal which has been slaughtered un-Islamically, meaning which has been slaughtered not according to the laws and the regulations of the Sharia. So I gave examples before, such as 3 conditions needs to be found for an animal to be considered Islamically lawful and halal, such as the throat of the animal is cut, the zabi has to say Bismillah, and the slaughterer has to either be a Muslim, and if certain conditions are found, then from the people of the book. Now, if one of these 3 conditions are missing, then that animal, Islamically speaking, will be considered as a maita and as a carcass. So just say, for example, if someone slaughtered the animal, but he did not read Bismillah, or somebody slaughtered the animal, but he wasn't a Muslim, he wasn't even a people of the book, he was, say, a Hindu or a Sikh, even then, that particular animal will be considered a carcass and a maita, and you would not be allowed to eat or consume that particular animal. Similarly, as you probably know, that a person in the state of ihram, he's not allowed to hunt or slaughter wild animals. So just say if someone in the state of ihram slaughtered a wild animal, then that animal would also be considered a maita, a carcass, and it's something which is unlawful and haram to consume. Now, from the Quranic text or from the Quranic verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that that part of the animal which is eatable, meaning that which normally people eat, such as the flesh, such as the, you could say, the kidneys, the livers, people eat that, sometimes the brains and so on, then that part of the animal which is eatable, then only that is unlawful and haram to consume. So only that part of the animal which is eatable, only that is unlawful and haram to consume. Besides that, those parts of the animal which a person, generally speaking, does not eat, then even though that animal has been slaughtered in an un-Islamic way, that part of the animal people who don't generally eat and consume, that part of the animal is still considered pure and pak. And that's what this particular text is saying, وَشَعْرُ الْمَيْتَةِ وَعَظْمُهَا طَاهِرٌ, that the hair of a carcass or a dead animal is still considered pure. Even the bones of the animal is considered pure and pak. So just say, for example, like there was say for example like a cow. So just say a cow was like, it wasn't slaughtered correctly or Islamically. So therefore, generally speaking, that is a maita we are not allowed to eat. However, if for example the bones, that cow, after after a while, then all the meat is then taken off, and then you've got the skeleton of the cow, then that bones or the skeleton of the cow will be pure and pak. Meaning that if you were to touch it, your hand does not become impure. And if you want to then use it for some other kind of worldly purposes or for some other reasons, then you're allowed to do it without the need to go through the process of dibaagha and tanning. Even the hair of the animal, so just say for example the hair of the animal, like just say if there was a horse or something which was not slaughtered Islamically, then when that horse afterwards, the hair, you're allowed to use that hair, will be considered pure and pak. So what I'm trying to say is that, the Quranic verse where it says that إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةَ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making carcass and carrion lawful and haram and prohibited to consume, but it is only prohibited in the sense of eating and consuming, but not in terms of things which are lawful and which people don't generally eat and consume. So things such as its bone, things such as its hair, then these things still remain pak and pure. Things before we finish this particular section. One masla here is with regards to the fat of the animal, which in Urdu is called the charbi. Is the regards to the fat of the animal. So the answer to the fat of the to this particular question will depend on how the animal was slaughtered. Conditions which I've just mentioned now is being, then that animal's fat will be able to consume. If it wasn't slaughtered Islamically, then the fat of the animal will be considered impure and unlawful to use. Now this takes me on to the next ruling here very quickly, and that is with regards to the issue of soaps. Soaps, these kind of things, where many of these soaps which we have, they have animal fat inside. So the question is that whether it is permissible to use soap or not. Now with regards to the issue of soap, obviously the encouragement should be that to use soap which does not have animal fat inside. So try to look for, and there are many soaps which are sold in the market, which are sold in Asda and all these places, which does not have animal fat inside. So try to use those kind of soaps which does not have animal fat. However, just say for example, you can't find a soap which has, which does not have animal fat inside. So therefore, to use soap which has animal fats inside will be permissible and lawful to use. And the reason for its flexibility is because some Sahabas, particularly in the name of Sayyiduna Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu anhu, and also Sayyiduna Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, have said that the verse إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ مَيْتَةَ, it's only unlawful and haram, as we kind of been looking at just now, in terms of consuming and in terms of eating. However, to use animal parts or the fat of an animal externally, i.e. to make it into soap, then that is permissible and lawful. So because there's kind of like ikhtilaf, or there's a kind of difference of opinion with regards to this issue, so therefore automatically there is some kind of leeway and flexibility. So the conclusion is that with regards to soap which have animal fat inside, obviously preferable you should try and avoid it and use soap which does not have animal fat. However, if you do use it, then it will be permissible and lawful due to the ruling and the statements of Sayyiduna Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu anhu and of Sayyiduna Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu. So alhamdulillah, that kind of concludes this section regarding tanning. The next section which we are going to start is with regards to, well, the title of this particular section is Wasurul Admi. And the word sur, Arabic word, in English literally means leftover. The leftover water of certain people or human beings, or it could be animals and so on. So what is the ruling with regards to that? Now, if you cast your mind back to last week's lesson, I mentioned some rulings with regards to water. And I mentioned that if any impurity or najas was to fall inside flowing water, or inside a lake or a pool of water which is more than 10 by 10, then that water will remain pak and pure. So you got a big massive pond or a lake, and somebody was to put a bit of alcohol inside, or somebody was to put some blood inside, because it's a big massive lake, that lake will be considered pure and pak. And similarly, the same rule applies here as well, that there's a big massive lake or a flowing water. So if a haram animal such as a pig or a swine was to go and start drinking from that water, or if, say, for example, a haram animal such as tigers was to go there and start drinking from that water, then that water will still remain pure and pak. Why? Because there's so much water, the water is in excess, so therefore that little bit of impurity would not have an effect here. And then I went on to mention that any water which is less than 10 by 10, i.e. just say a small bowl of water, if any impurity was to fall inside there, then automatically that bowl of water will become impure. So just say you had a bowl of water and some blood, a small tiny speck of blood fell inside, then automatically that water becomes impure for you to use. Now similarly, a question arises here, is that just say for example if a human being was to drink from a bowl of water, or just say for example if a cat was to drink from a bowl of water, or just say a rat or a mouse was to drink from a bowl of water, then what will be the status and the hukum of the leftover water? Meaning that would we be able to use it for wuzu, or do we have to chuck it away and get a new bucket of water or a new bowl of water? Now obviously this is something which doesn't really apply in this day and age, because obviously we have wuzu areas and water nicely comes from the tap and so on, so there's no doubt. But it does apply to, say, things or situations back in Bangladesh or in Pakistan where obviously those who visited will know that the houses, the doors are always open. You always see like cats running inside the house and going out of the house. There's rats there, there are mice there, there are snakes there and so on. So if they were to drink from the water, then what will be the status and the hukum of this leftover water? Now the first ruling which is mentioned here is Wasurul Admi wama yukalu lahmuhu tahir, i.e. the leftover water of a human being, Admi, wama yukalu lahmuhu, and the leftover water of those animals whose meat is lawful and halal to consume, tahirun, are considered pak and pure. So the meaning of this text will be, let's just say there was a tank of water and a human being drank from it. Like a human being, a Muslim or even a disbeliever, it doesn't matter, he was to drink from that particular water, then that water will be considered pure and pak. And similarly, if, say, for example, those animals which you are allowed and lawful to consume, such as cows or sheep or goats and so on, if they were to drink from that particular tank of water, then the leftover water will be permissible and lawful to consume. And the reason why is because these animals, like human beings, we are considered pak and pure. Our saliva is considered pak and pure. So even if, for example, if someone was to spit at you, that spit is not considered impure. Okay, you could actually read namaz even though there's spit on your clothes, because spit is not considered impure. And similarly, those animals who are lawful or permissible to consume, such as cows, goats, sheep, and so on. So because their body and their flesh is lawful and allowed to consume, and because saliva is something which comes from the flesh of the body, so when the flesh is lawful and halal to consume, so therefore the saliva will also be pak and pure. So if it was to fall on your body, then you will be able to, read namaz. Similarly, if these animals were to drink from water, then that water which is now left over will be permissible and lawful to use. The second text goes on to say, وَسُورُ الْكَلْبِ وَالْخِنْزِيرِ وَالسِّبَاءِ الْبَهَائِمِ نَجَسٌ, i.e. the leftover water of dogs, of khinzir, i.e. of pigs, swines, وَالسِّبَاءِ الْبَهَائِمِ, and of wild animals, of wild predators, then they are considered pure and najas and napak. Okay, so the second ruling very straightforward, and that is the leftover water of a dog. I may have mentioned this before, but in the Hanafi fiqh we say that the actual body of the dog, okay, so the fur of the dog, that is not impure. So if the dog's body was to touch your clothes, as long as you cannot see any apparent impurity or najas, your clothes is fine, your clothes is pure, and you can read namaz. The only thing which is impure and najas of a dog is its saliva. So if the saliva of the dog was to touch your clothes, then you have to wash your clothes. Okay? And that's why the same ruling applies for the leftover water as well. Let's say, for example, you had a tank of water which is in meter and in width and in length, and then what happens, a dog goes and then starts drinking from it, then that water automatically becomes impure. Because the saliva of the dog is impure, it then transfers onto the water, and then that water becomes impure and najas, so therefore it will not be permissible and lawful for you to use. The third ruling here is وَسُورُ الْحِرَّةِ وَدَجَاجَةَ الْمُخَلَّاتِ وَالسِّبَاعِ الطُّيُورِ وَمَا يَسْكُنُ فِي الْبُيُوتِ مِثْلُ الْحَيَّةِ وَالْفَأْرَ مَكْرُوهٌ. Okay, now the third text here is with regards to the leftover water of cats. Hirra means cats. So again, the leftover water of cats is considered makruh or disliked, meaning that you can use it, but it's preferable for you not to use it. Now the reason why it's considered disliked or makruh is when you look at it, just generally speaking, the leftover water of cats should not be lawful or permissible to use, because it is unlawful and haram to consume cats, so therefore the water should also be impure and najas. But the reason why there's a bit of flexibility in the ruling is because cats are one of those animals which are known as min at-tawafina alaykum wat-tawafat, or they are known as as-sawakin al-buyut, i.e. those animals which come inside people's homes. They're known as domestic pets. They live in with the families. Some people, they have cats as pets and so on. So because of that reason, there is more flexibility in the ruling. And especially in olden days where obviously a lot of cats would come in and out. So sometimes what would happen is that people, they would leave some bowl of water, so a cat would come, drink from it, and then just run away. So if we were to give a ruling or an order, or you have to now throw away the water and get a new fresh water, then it will be difficult for people to do wuzu and ghusl. So therefore there's a slight flexibility here, and the scholars have said that the leftover water of cats is considered makruh and disliked. Okay, you can use it, but it's preferable not to. And similarly, mukhallat, the jaja means, i.e. those kind of chickens which eat impurities and najas. Those of you who've been in Bangladesh or Pakistan will know that in the villages you get these kind of chickens that instead of eating grains, instead of eating what they're supposed to eat, they actually eat impurities of cows or sheep and dung, all these kind of things, they eat that. And then what happens, they then go and start drinking the water. So obviously in their mouth, there's impurities, there's najas, there's dung inside there, and then they go and start drinking water. So it is obvious that whatever is on their mouth and their lips, then it's gonna, or on the beak, it's going to transfer onto the water. So because of that reason, that water becomes impure and napak to use. And the same also applies for wasiba'i tuyur, i.e. wild birds. So wild birds such as hawk, falcon and so on. So because they are such animals or birds which actually hunt with their claws and their beak and so on, and because the hawk itself is something which is unlawful and haram to consume, so if they were to use the water, drink the water, then that water would also be impure and najas to use. And they're just giving some example afterwards of domestic animals, animals which live in the homes, such as snakes and rats and so on. So again, snakes, if they were to drink from a bowl of water, so because the actual snake is a unlawful animal, it's haram to consume, then strictly speaking, the ruling should have been that the water should be impure and najis to use. But because they are one of those animals which come into the house and they go around, so because of that reason, there's some flexibility in the ruling. And the same also applies with regards to fa'ra, i.e. rats and mouse. Then he goes on to say, the last ruling here is wasurul himar wal baghl mashkukun, i.e. the leftover water of himar, i.e. donkeys, wal baghl, i.e. mule, is considered mashkuk and doubtful. So donkeys, just say there's a tank of water, less than 10 by 10, a donkey or a mule drank from it, then that water will be considered doubtful. And because it's doubtful, the reason why it's doubtful, because this is like obviously a kind of scholarly issue here, and the reason why it's doubtful is because obviously there's doubts in the ahadith, in the narrations, and also in terms of logic and analytical reasoning with regards to whether the meat of the donkey and also the leftover water of a donkey, whether it should be considered impure or pure. So because of that reason, there's a kind of doubtful ruling here. So therefore the scholars have said afterwards, فَإِن لَمْ يَجِدِ الْإِنسَانِ غَيْرَهُمَا تَوَضَّعَ بِهِ وَتَيَمَّمَ وَبِأَيِّهِمَا بَدَأَ جَازًا. Which basically means that if he cannot find any other water besides this water which a donkey or a mule has drank, then because he's got no other alternative, he will have to do two things. Number one, tawadda'a bihi, he will have to do wuzu with that water. So he's got no other water, there's no other fresh water about. He's got a bowl of water or a tank of water which he has seen a donkey or a mule drink from. So he will have to use that water for wuzu or ghusl. وَتَيَمَّمَ, and he will then have to do tayammum. He will then have to do tayammum, so he'll have to do two things. And then the musannif or the author then goes on to say, وَبِأَيِّهِمَا بَدَأَ جَازًا, i.e. whichever one he starts off with will be permissible and lawful. So that is the ruling with regards to leftover water of donkeys and mule, is that because we're not sure with regards to whether the leftover water or the actual saliva of a donkey or mule, whether it's pure or not, so therefore the scholars give a twofold ruling, and they've said that number one, you will have to use that particular water, and then number two, you will have to do tayammum. Obviously, if there is fresh water available beside, then obviously you will have to use that, but this ruling applies only when there is no water about besides this water where a donkey or a mule has drank from. Then there's two things which you have to do. That is, you will have to do wuzu with that, and number two is you will have to do tayammum with that. So that concludes this section with regards to the leftover water with regards to animals and human beings. Inshallah, the next section which we will start next week is with regards to tayammum and how to do tayammum. So what we read today, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to act upon what's been said. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا ورزقا طيبا وشفاء من كل داء. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا رب.
Be a student of knowledge.